I will call the Intra-Governmental Relations Committee meeting to order at 7 p.m. Present are committee members Gilchrist, Heeman, and Scarl, council members Glassburn, Kelly, Limpert, Williamson, Mayor Daley Jones, Director of Law Garreau, and guests. The purpose of this evening's meeting is to interview the mayor's appointment to the Director of Economic and Community Development, Max Upton. Mayor Daley Jones, would you like to introduce your appointment?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you to your committee and for council for convening this evening for the purpose of allowing me to introduce you to Max Upton. Max is my selection to the Economic and Community Development Director position here for our city of North Homestead. And Max brings with him a wealth of experience from the cities of Lorraine and Cleveland in economic development and also from the private sector. Max is a veteran and has served our country with distinction. And tonight, I invite you to hear more about Max's background and ask him questions. And hopefully, we will be welcoming Max into our community very soon. Max.
Thank you, Mayor Jones. Mr. Upton, thank you for joining us tonight. Before the committee and council get started in asking you questions, would you like to say anything to open?
Yes, thank you so much. Pleasure to be here, Madam Chairwoman. I'm humbled and really excited at the opportunity to lead the economic and community development efforts within the city of North Homestead. Just a little bit about myself, as Mayor Daley Jones indicated, I'm a veteran of the war in Afghanistan. I did a tour in 2011, 2012, where our mission was training the Afghan National Army prior to handing over command of the capital, which was in Kabul. When I came home, I obtained my undergraduate degree at Cleveland State University, majoring in urban studies and public management. I went on and I have a master's degree in public administration. I have a graduate certificate in urban economic development. In addition to that, I've taught economic development finance to undergraduate, juniors, and seniors at Cleveland State University on an adjunct basis. I do have a lot of experience in economic development. As the mayor indicated, I was the economic development director for Midtown Cleveland and was in on the ground floor of a lot of the work that you see now on Euclid Avenue, where the Cleveland Foundation is moving out of the Hanna building into Midtown, and they're really starting to aggregate a lot of density around the 55th to 79th corridor on Euclid Avenue. Currently, I'm the Director of Building, Housing, and Planning at the City of Lorraine, where, among other things, I supervise the building division, code enforcement, economic development, community development, city planning, and a bunch of other functions as needed to support the administration there. Like I said, humbled to be here before this committee and welcome any questions about my background and experience.
Thank you, sir. I also want to thank you for your service to our country.
Thank you.
My first question is, why do you want to work for North Homestead?
Because I think it's a really interesting opportunity. North Homestead is a second-ring suburban city, a lot of retail. As the mayor indicated, there's a lot of vacant retail space, and it's kind of a chance to reimagine what that looks like going into the 21st, or going into the next decade, because what COVID has shown is that shopping patterns have changed, spending patterns have changed, and I think it's a really interesting opportunity to reimagine and reinvigorate those storefronts and really be out on the forefront of economic development instead of sitting back behind a desk waiting for your phone to ring, hoping that it's something that will be transformative and being proactive. And I believe the mayor's comments of full-time boots on the ground, that sounds a lot like what I've done in my past.
Wonderful. Ms. Heeman and Mr. Scarl, As members of the committee, do either of you have any questions before I open it to council? Ms. Heeman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening and welcome. I'm excited to have seen your resume, and thank you for coming this evening and you're interested in working for our city. I have a couple questions, please, about the Midtown. So Midtown, that whole area runs down Euclid Avenue, and I would imagine the properties were difficult to acquire. So for example, in North Homestead, we have a series of small strip little plazas, right? 3-4 storefronts, 6 storefronts, and then a next and a next. All of different ownership, right? That don't seem to be connected in any way. How did you accomplish, organizing those similar situations, really, of ownership in Midtown?
Great question. So Midtown, we were blessed to have the support of the Cleveland Foundation, which is really instrumental to the move. A lot of people don't know. I hope I'm okay in saying this, I haven't, but the Cleveland Foundation supported a lot of the land acquisition.
Right.
We partnered with a private sector developer who was, for all intents and purposes, a straw purchaser. And then Midtown Cleveland had its own real estate arm, Lassie Enterprises, where we were able to acquire land. So under 3 or 4 different entities, we were able to acquire land so that the Ken Pendergasses of the world didn't really catch on to what was going on until the announcement that the Cleveland Foundation was moving right across from Gallucci. So it took a lot of nonprofit partners, it took private sector partners, it took us as the local community development corporation, and then we also worked with the Cuyahoga County Land Bank, because there was some land bank land, as well as the City of Cleveland's land bank. So it was a real a multi-jurisdictional, private, public, nonprofit sectors working together to aggregate that land. And I would say that that's probably what would have to happen in this regard without studying property ownership, entanglements, all those sorts of things. And I have really great relationships with the folks at the Cuyahoga County Land Bank. I worked a lot with them when I was the director of development at Midtown, and would really be thrilled to work with the Cuyahoga County Land Bank again. A lot of great folks up there downtown.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Scarrow?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, Mr. Upton, thank you for your service again. I'm sure we all really appreciate that.
Thank you.
In your introduction, you did say that you were doing, wearing a lot of different hats. What was your day-to-day activities for the city of Lorraine?
Oh, it depended on the day. A lot of my activities were around code enforcement and blight elimination. We had something like 330 homes on our demolition list. Our housing court was a huge undertaking that fell underneath my jurisdiction, and a lot of the members of council were particularly concerned about houses that had become blighted and were subject to code violations. So a lot of my time was spent managing code enforcement and then also seeing buildings through the demolition process. In fact, in my time there, we demoed, I think it's 79 homes in the last year, which is more than the city of Lorraine had ever done at any point in time as a city itself in the last 20 years. So a lot of it was around blight, and what I say is kind of raising the floor of the housing stock, because our for sale home values were only going to get so high, so we really had to eliminate the worst of the worst, and that's what took up a lion's share of my time over the last years is blight and code enforcement.
Thank you. Follow up to that, did you have support staff, or were you on your own to do all this?
Right now, I think my org chart is I manage and supervise 27 staff members.
Okay, thank you. And I also see in your resume that your passion for using your education, military experience, and civilian talents, that you'll be used on moving our city forward. If hired, what would be the first item on your agenda to get us going in the right direction? It's a direction that has become stale in our city.
Great question. I think the first thing that I would do is I would meet with all of our top employers. There's a town in Colorado called Littleton, Colorado, they, just a quick caveat, and I'll, in a roundabout way, answer your question. So Littleton, Colorado, they were home to a big defense contractor in the mid-1980s, mid-1990s, somewhere around there. That defense contractor pulled out, and the entire town's economy just tanked. The mayor and the development director came up with a concept at the time called economic gardening, and it's just like it sounds. It's like watering your own garden. So they focused on the companies that were between 5 and 100 employees and between $1 million and $10 million in revenue, and tried to do everything that they could do to help those companies grow so that their economy would be diverse. It would be able to withstand a downturn in one particular sector, and it would not be subject to one business having the fortunes of the entire town's economy. So I say all that to say that I would get out there and speak to the business owners, the Moen corporations, the mom and pops, and just frankly ask them what the city can do, or what are we not doing is probably the more important question, and just listen. And that would be my first real endeavor, is to get out into the business community, make sure they know who I am, that I'm not just standing behind a desk waiting for my phone to ring, and let them know that, we're here, and the mayor's, this new administration is about growth and creating jobs and making it easy to do business in the city as opposed to difficult.
Thank you very much. No further questions, Madam Chair, at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Scarrow. Go ahead, Mrs. Heenan has another question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one. I would like to thank you for your service as well. Councilwoman Williamson and I are lifetime members of the VFW here in North Olmsted, and you might enjoy a visit to our post.
I always love visiting VFW posts. Vets are my people.
They're pretty friendly there. I did want to ask quickly, so in campaigning, one of the things that, residents asked about and were interested in is, resident participation of sorts. Now, you mentioned business owner participation. I ran across several residents that actually were either recently retired or still actively engaged in, pretty decent, business jobs, right, with marketing. Some had been commercial banking and finance, that sort of thing. And I was wondering if you would be open to somewhat of a resident roundtable so that, businesses and residents can kind of, in different venues, of course, probably not together at the same event, but perhaps give you their input as well, what residents see, and perhaps those that had been in those professional capacities in the past that are now residents of North Olmsted. Would you be at all interested in that sort of?
So the short answer is absolutely, and then as you might suspect, there's probably a long answer as well. So that it takes me back to when I was at Midtown. One of the things that we did that was really interesting and transformative in terms of neighborhood engagement. I think that residents' voices should be heard in every part of the planning process, because too often times when residents actually are engaged is like at the back end to kind of maybe check a box to make sure we talk to a couple people, right? We did a thing called Leo's Listening Lounge. I don't know if you heard of it. For those of you that might be my senior, Leo's Casino, 73rd and Euclid, it was like the hallmark of Motown black music back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and because of urban renewal, it was decimated and destroyed, right? So Rock and Roll Hall of Fame puts a plaque out there, and then when they go to put the Aldi's in, they strip the plaque out, and so there was this real resentment in the community about not celebrating Leo's Casino. So what we did is we started neighborhood engagement by having what I would basically call them tribute bands, what we would refer to them as. We did porch front tribute bands where we invited the residents out, invited the businesses out, and had organic conversations. And from that, we started to talk about, if you owned a plot of land on Euclid Avenue, what would you do with it? What do you want to see in your neighborhood? All of those sorts of conversations. And it was kind of a passive way to get community business together in a third space to kind of have a conversation and get their input, but do it in a way that's genuine and engaging. So I truly believe in citizen engagement, and I think that now, to make a comment just generally, there's a lot of folks that just get angry, and I think the overarching principles are angry because they're not engaged, and they're not engaged meaningfully to have agency in the process. And I think that's essential, especially when you're talking about doing things that may change their neighborhood, right? They should be at the table at the beginning. That's how I feel.
I appreciate thank you. My Ward 4 is probably the largest mix of business and residents living together, and it's a constant struggle that, residents know we need the businesses, the businesses know we need the residents, but coexisting is sometimes challenging, so I'm very much looking forward to that philosophy. Thank you so much.
And I've actually had coffee at kitchen tables talking to residents, and that's very much, I think, the way you ought to do things is at that granular level.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Heeman. Okay, so at this point, I would like to open up to the rest of council. Anyone have any questions for Mr. Upton? Mr. Kelly?
Thank you very much. And I'd like to echo, thank you for your service to our country.
Thank you, Councilman.
So looking over your resume, you're certainly qualified for this position. You're pretty well-rounded, you have great education. I'm looking at all these different timelines you have on here, and you don't stay at every position for very long, 15 months, 4 months, whatever, going down through these different timelines. If you get this position, you intend to stay?
Yes. Yes.
Because this new administration, it's exciting. Look what can happen with the city of North Homestead now, and certainly would like directors that are all in and would be here during this administration.
Councilman, I wouldn't be in front of this body if I wasn't committed to that. Frankly, this is an open public meeting, and I still have to go back into the office tomorrow, having asked for this job today, so I wouldn't do that if I wasn't all in.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mr. Glassford?
Thank you, Chairwoman. Mr. Upton, this past year, Councilwoman Heeman and I, especially on the eastern part of the town, where we share borders with our wards, we went door to door to the approximately 60 businesses between the Fairview Park border and Columbia Road. The council had created a relief program for small businesses, and it was interesting. I knew some small business owners from my ward, but when Councilwoman Heeman and I went to all these businesses, and it only took us, 6 hours combined maybe to talk to each of these and go door to door, and we met with about 2/3 of them, 42 I think it was in the end. Not one of them had met our previous economic development consultant. Not one had met our economic development or planning director. And the overwhelming majority, in excess of 80%, had no contact with the city whatsoever. And the ones that did, the contact was getting cited for code violations. So they had negative feelings about the city. This maybe comes off more as a statement than a question, but I'd be curious as to your input. I get the impression that if we just talk to some of these businesses and listen to what they had, whether it was looking to expand parking, help with signage, help understanding how to revitalize their storefront, that there's a lot of low-hanging fruit there that you might assume has been done already, but it hasn't.
You're 100% correct.
I guess I would encourage you maybe to literally walk up and down Lorraine Road and not just the $1 to $10 million businesses, but all of them, and just be that friendly face and see what they say. And I'm sure you're not going to strike gold every time, but I think there's a lot of opportunity there that hasn't been taken advantage of.
I completely agree, and that's part of the headwinds I faced, kind of reimagining the face of the department I run now is, I got a code violation for not cutting my grass. Well, I just bought the property a week ago. What the heck's going on here, right? That sort of thing. And, I don't know as though Amazon HQ, whatever they're on, is going to land in North Homestead. But I think that if we could help every business add 10 employees, it would have a greater effect than something of that magnitude. And you're exactly correct. Walking the streets and actually pounding the pavement is the way to do it. I'd be happy to do that in your ward with you and with any member of council in their ward. That's how you get stuff done.
Thank you very much.
Council President?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Max, welcome. And I just want, it's really more of a statement than a question. I'm very impressed with your long checklist of tasks and responsibilities that you've performed in all of your previous endeavors. And I believe that they have all prepared you substantially for this opportunity. And I'm glad that this particular opportunity likely won't overburden you, because I'm sure that Mayor Daley Jones has a narrower focus in mind to take advantage of your talents. So thank you for being here, and looking forward to see how the vote goes.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Ms. Williamson?
Thank you. Thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for your service. I'm just going to echo everyone else. But I know that you're aware, it's no secret, there are a number of empty storefronts along Lorraine. How do you plan on perhaps recruiting or pursuing new businesses to come in? And is there perhaps maybe a plan down the road to help the small businesses with some kind of financial funding to put them in these empty storefronts? No, it's a two-part question, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so in terms of answering like the how do you fill empty storefronts, I think you got to understand the market first, and part of that is understanding where people are leaving. So if there are what, not to get too wonky, but they're called capture rates, and if there are people leaving to go out of town to get their hair cut, right? You can reasonably assume that we probably need more barbershops. And there's a very analytical approach that I'm being very just general. But I would go to take a look at a true retail market study and see what the market opportunity for particular businesses are. I think like the city of Cleveland, there is with the VPI program, it's the Vacant Property Initiative, where there's a specific incentive for folks to go in and occupy buildings that were formerly vacant. I think that would be something that would be really interesting. Right now, we just launched a storefront renovation program in Lorraine that actually you can get windows, signs, anything that has to do with the facade, tuck pointing brick, if you have an older building, up to a $40,000 grant to fix the facade of your building. So I think narrowly focused incentives towards vacant buildings would be the first thing, or the second thing. The first thing would be just really understanding the market and what the marketability of those particular spaces are. Sometimes in older buildings, they're just cut up a wrong way, so then maybe the buildings have to be modified. So it's really, each one's a case-by-case basis, but just broadly speaking, those would kind of be the way I try to tackle that. Just I don't know if that fully answers your question.
Totally. Thank you so much.
Ms. Heeman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I also want to ask, so you did a brief stint as a safety director with the city of Lorraine.
Not my cup of tea.
Yeah, how and why did you become appointed to that position, or?
That's what I was asked to do at the time that I came in, and it's just you're just pulled in 100 different directions all the time, and my talents, and the Lord blessed me with the ability to understand community and economic development. That's what I know. That's what I'm passionate about, and I think the mayor then recognized that and put me in a place where I could be successful.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Limpert?
Thank you. Let's go, Chris. So just to follow up, so first off, Mr. Kelly, I echo your question, so thank you for raising that. And I would hope that, over the 4 years and hopefully more, you'll continue to take on challenges here in this city if appointed. I would like to hear a little bit more, I think you did mention it, your philosophy on tax abatements, as well as how do you manage building and zoning codes as it relates to collaborating to get those changed or updated or variances for the economic development that you'd like to achieve? Those are just two areas I'd like to hear a little bit more on how you approach things.
So how we approach tax abatement, so in the city, as it sits now, there are tax abatement areas in the entire city as an enterprise zone. And so what I think is the best practice is to secure developers agreements, where you're not just willy-nilly giving out tax abatements. The developers commit to a certain number of job creation, a certain amount of payroll, and some benchmarks by which they should hit those things. Jobs Ohio does a lot of that with their incentive programs. That being said, if they fall like within a CRA area, they're kind of by right almost entitled to it, so it's a fine line you have to walk there. With respect to planning and zoning, last February we actually rewrote the entire, well, what didn't happen in 1 month, but over a course of months, at the end of 2020 into the beginning of 2021, we actually rewrote the entire zoning code for the city, and it did so in a way that made it a form-based code, which was a lot easier and more accessible. It relieved unnecessary barriers, allowed for administrative reviews and things like that for the planning and zoning administrator in order for folks to have more certainty that, you know, when they're optioning pieces of land, that they're not going to have 9 months of hurdles getting through zoning, because that'll just turn the developer off in a day if they can't get through the entitlement process in less than 3-4 months, right? So we rewrote the entire zoning code to make it more developer-friendly, but also with protections to safeguard the community and still facilitate the right amount of community input in the planning process.
And then just another question. Thank you for that answer and kind of enlighten us on how you approach things. What is your familiarity with working with school boards and as it relates to economic development and any of the financial considerations there?
I think the best practice is to have the school board at the table right from the beginning. I know some communities like North Ridgeville, for example, they already worked out a deal that they know exactly the incentive they're able to offer. They know exactly what the school board will be able to approve, and they have that done before they walk in the door for any type of thing. The first, or the last TIF, I should say, that I put in place, we had just settled a lawsuit with the Amherst School District around tax abatement, residential tax abatement for homes that were in the city of Lorraine but were Amherst School District. And we settled that lawsuit, and then we negotiated the first TIF district afterwards. And what we did is we just were very open and transparent, asked them their goals, and kind of came to mutual understandings. And I think that engaging the school board way at the beginning of a transaction is the right way to go. I also think that there are quantitative and qualitative considerations, right? So, for example, we worked with a company that was willing to provide apprenticeships, and they were an engineering firm, right? So there's more than a monetary consideration for the school board to approve a tax abatement, because at the end of the day, if the project doesn't go forward, they're still getting the same property taxes that they got as yesterday, right? So there's some incentive that they maybe take a qualitative approach and maybe have apprenticeships or job training programs or those sorts of things kind of rolled into a community benefits agreement. I don't know if you're familiar with those particular agreements, but that's another way of approaching a tax incentive. Because really, if you're doing your due diligence and you're at the door with a TIF, that really is supposed to be a but-for incentive. And what I mean is, but for this TIF, this project's not financially feasible. So the school board's going to take some type of haircut 9 times out of 10 than they otherwise would have realized on the revenue side. So having the qualitative and quantitative conversation, understanding their goals, and just keeping lines of communication open, I think that's the way to go.
Thank you.
Ms. Heeman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Upton, I want to reassure you, though, of one thing. So we, in the reorganization that Mayor Jones has presented to us in her, organizational chart, there is a planning position. So, we are looking to you for a much more sophisticated level, so you won't be redoing our planning and zoning exactly yourself. You won't be spread too thin in that area. I know that for myself, and I think a couple other council members, while folks understand, tax abatements real well, they don't necessarily understand tax credits very well. They don't necessarily understand multi-layer financing as well. They don't understand private equity and other non-traditional types of partnership financing for larger projects and getting like the Midtown Corridor done. And your school board, for example, Cleveland schools actually have an on-site location inside of Metro Health Hospital, just as you're suggesting these training programs and other, other apprenticeship programs. So that is all possible, and I'm looking very much forward to you being able to help guide us toward those things, because I think that that is the mayor's desire and direction in bringing you before us to become a much more sophisticated service to us as a city in that realm. So tax abatements are always a bad thing to residents. They sound horrible. But these other things, they, are just really, I think, a whole big new education for us. And I'm looking forward to that. Thank you. And if you have anything to add, please, but I'm all in favor.
Music to my ears that I'm not rewriting another zoning code. That was quite a hairy process. Don't want to do it again in the near future, at least. But no, I'm really looking forward to it, and I think that teaching is what I've done. I have a real appreciation for me pestering my professors for grades when I had to grade 20 papers at the end of a semester. So, but it's part of what I know. I guess I know how to do in terms of educating folks. And I think when you democratize information and make it digestible so people understand it, it takes the edge off and it makes it a less off-putting. And I think that goes back to my philosophy around public engagement and community involvement in the process.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Seeing no further questions, I move that the Intra-Governmental Relations Committee recommend approval of the appointment of Max Upton to Director of Economic and Community Development, and ask for a second.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Gilchrist, seconded by Ms. Heeman. All in favor say yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. The motion passes 3 to 0. Thank you, Mr. Upton, for coming this evening. Council is having a special council meeting tonight in order to allow the full council to vote on your nomination. With nothing else on the agenda, the Intra-Governmental Relations Committee will conclude at 7:34. Thank you.
The special council meeting of January 11th, 2022 will now please come to order. The audience is invited to join council in the recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Broussard,
Present.
Ms. Gilchrist,
Present.
Mr. Glassburn,
Here.
Ms. Heeman,
Here.
Mr. Kelly,
Here.
Mr. Limpert,
Present.
Mr. Scarl,
Present.
Ms. Williamson.
Here.
Moving into council committee reports, Councilwoman Williamson, Chairwoman of the Public Safety, Health, and Welfare Committee. Do you have a report this evening?
No report, Mr. President, thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Limpert, Chairman of the Building, Zoning, and Development Committee. Do you have a report this evening?
No report this evening, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Heeman, Chairwoman of the Recreation, Public Parks, and Buildings Committee. Do you have a report this evening?
No report. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilman Glassburn, Chairman of the Finance Committee. Do you have a report this evening?
No report this evening.
Thank you. Councilman Kelly, Chairman of the Streets and Transportation Committee. Do you have a report this evening?
No report this evening. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilman Scarl, Chairman of the Environmental Control Committee. Do you have a report this evening?
No report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councilwoman Gilchrist, Chairwoman of the Intra-Governmental Relations Committee. Do you have a report this evening?
Thank you, Mr. President. I do have a report. The Inter-Governmental Relations Committee met at 7 p.m. tonight, January 11th, 2022. Present were committee members Gilchrist, Heeman, and Scarl, council members Glassburn, Kelly, Limpert, and Williamson, Mayor Daley Jones, Director of Law, Garreau, and guests. The purpose of the meeting was to interview Max Upton, Mayor Daley Jones' appointment to Director of Economic and Community Development. Mayor Daley Jones introduced Mr. Upton and he followed up with a brief summary. The committee and council proceeded to interview Mr. Upton. After everyone had a chance to ask questions, the committee voted 3-0 to recommend appointment of Mr. Upton to the Director of Economic and Community Development position. Mr. President, at this time, I move to approve the appointment of Mr. Upton as the Director of Economic and Community Development and ask for a second.
Second.
Motion to approve the appointment of Max Upton to Director of Economic and Community Development made by Councilwoman Gilchrist, seconded by Councilwoman Heeman. Roll call, please.
Ms. Gilchrist,
Yes.
Ms. Heeman,
Yes.
Mr. Limpert,
Yes.
Ms. Williamson,
Yes.
Mr. Glassburn,
Yes.
Mr. Kelly,
Yes, with comment. So you're the first director that the council is going to be appointing to the new administration. We hope you do the new administration proud, and we'd be happy to have someone on board like you. Yes.
Mr. Scarl.
Yes, with comment. I'd like to thank Mayor Daley Jones for bringing such a distinguished gentleman for this very important, our first director position, but something that we've lacked for a long time, and I think it's going to be a great thing for our city. Thank you.
Max Upton is appointed as the Director of Economic and Community Development by a vote of 7-0. With the agenda being completed and there being no further business to come before council, the special meeting of January 11th, 2022 is